Live! Once again, live from the wastelands of the internet, I have come. Yes, it is I, the Nomad, coming to bring you the news. News of the day, news of the week, news of, well, whatever I found neglected to actually look at. Good morning, good morning, good morning. And the day has started, and it's going to be a, it's one of those days. And I apologize for being a little bit late. I had to answer a phone call from my eldest daughter, who is now just moved into her new home and is encountering all the joys and love of being a homeowner, with all the different things that can go right and all the things that can go wrong. So we're working with that right now, and I will have to go pay her a visit a little bit later today. But in the meantime, we have news. We have news, and we will get started, shall we? U.S. says it will no longer mediate in Russia-Ukraine peace talks as Washington vows to stop flying to meetings and pushes both sides to deliver concrete ideas to stop the war. Washington has said it will no longer mediate peace negotiations between the Ukraine and Russia after despot Vladimir Putin refused to sign a ceasefire deal. The State Department spokesman Tammy Bruce said late last night that the U.S. will be changing the methodology of how we contribute, in that we will not be the mediators. We are not going to fly around the world at the drop of a hat to mediate meetings. That is now between the two parties, the former Fox News host added. Okay, first of all, let's talk about Tammy Bruce before we get into the seriousness of what we're talking about. Tammy Bruce was a diehard woke feminist who did a lot of damage. Okay, she was one of the leaders of NOW, the National Organization of Women. Okay, she went ballistic on several Republican candidates running for president at the time. Now she has since learned, who the people that she had been in bed with, truly are. Now it was a learning process for her, and she became a conservative, although she's not a conservative with a big C, she's a conservative with a little c, because she still can't accept the fact that there's something called social conservatism and that it's very important for society. She doesn't believe in that yet. And she may never believe in it. But she does understand now that a lot of the crap that the left had been pushing and a lot of the identity politics is what has led us to the degradation of our society today. Now, that's who Tammy Bruce is. Now, she's got a charismatic voice, which is one of the reasons that I assume that Trump picked her as one of the spokesmen, one of the State Department spokesmen and so forth. She is an interesting individual. She's not stupid, but anyway. Now let's get back to this. So Trump has now said, okay, you guys are now going to have to iron out your own deals. And that's what it's come down to. We're not going to play middleman. We're not going to play pickle in the middle. And to be honest, it's something that we've had to do for a long time. We should have been looking at doing this for a while now. It looks like I'm overmodulating a bit here. I apologize. So we're out of the middle. Look, Russia, Ukraine, talk. We're not going to stick in the middle of this. We're not going to fly around trying to mediate this all the time. We're going to take a step back. Here's the problem that you've got, though, doing that. And I disagree a bit with the Trump administration on this. Now, I agree that we can't be the ones going back and forth, back and forth. We need to sit up there and provide them a platform on which to talk and we need to say, here's what we're set up the places for the meetings and let them talk. But we can't be in the middle. I agree with that aspect of it. But to walk away like this leaves a vacuum in the wrong spot, because the idiots in Europe are the problem here. And while they have to agree to the solution, I don't think they can solve this. I don't think they have the intent. I think that the Western Europeans, such as France and Germany, are perfectly fine, all right, watching thousands of frickin' Russians and Ukrainians murder each other. I think they're perfectly happy with that. Now, if you really want to stop the war, okay, it's going to take concessions. It's going to take concessions on both sides. Zelensky doesn't believe he has to make any concessions. Russia believes they can win the war without concessions. Okay? That's where the two sides are right now. And it's not a good sign. And it isn't. Now, Putin, for his part, Putin wants a 3-day ceasefire for World War II anniversary next month. Ukraine says, why wait? President Putin has declared a 3-day ceasefire in Ukraine next week in honor of the 80th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. A statement posted on the Kremlin website said Putin had ordered a halt in Russian military activity for humanitarian reasons starting May 8th at midnight, lasting 3 days for Victory Day, a solemn holiday marked by both Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha responded, repeating Kiev's readiness to immediately adhere to a month-long ceasefire instead of a brief truce just to mark Victory Day. Why wait until May 8th? Sybiha said on X. If the fire can now be ceased now, and since any date for 30 days, so it is real, not just for a parade. Ukraine is ready to support a lasting, durable, and full ceasefire for at least 30 days. Okay, so what else has been happening here? All right. As you see, there's been some interesting developments here, and I will admit these are developments. Right. First of all, if we take a look at the live map, you see that this city's here, Murad or Murad, and this is Pokrovsk, all right, are in imminent danger of being taken over by the Russians. The Russians have been moving this line closer and closer. They're now within a mile here in an effort to eventually, all right, try to put pressure either here or here. The other thing that you're seeing more attacks on now is Kharkiv is now receiving more and more attention. However, from the Ukrainian side, you are seeing them now take a bit more of the fight back, okay, to the Russians. They are now becoming a bit more offensive, all right? They have started their own kind of counteroffensive out here. They have shot down a Russian Su-30, okay, over the Black Sea via a drone, using a drone. So after the pause of weapons and other things to the Ukrainians, it now appears as if that has now ended and that the Ukrainians are now back to being able to do at least a little bit of damage, all right, on their own, and at least a bit of counterfire, right? So this is something that's going to be necessary, I think, for the Russians to actually get serious about a ceasefire. And I know people don't want to hear this, but the Russians' view of the war is that they're winning. All right? That's the Russian view. That is Putin's view. All right? I know the West wants to jump on anything and everything, especially the Western press, wants to jump on anything and everything that smacks of the Russians losing, right? Especially if it's losing support. All right. For example, if there's a protest somewhere, regardless of how you know widespread, etc., there's a protest, they exploit it. All right, saying that Putin is going down, Putin's going down, while at the same time not reporting the other protests, because there have been protests, a series of protests in the Ukraine, all right, about let's end this freaking war, let's end this battle, and of course the Western press doesn't ever talk about that. So, is the war close to being finished? The answer is no. Should there be a ceasefire? Could this 3-day ceasefire work? Yes. Will it? Will it lead to something else? Hard to say. Hard to say. We can only hope. Seriously, we can only hope. Meanwhile, the other big war that's going on, Israel at war, day 573. What's happening in Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank? A 40-year-old woman was injured on her way to a shelter due to Yemen missile sirens. Gaza floats claim of a drone attack. Get rid of that crap. Government to discuss the October 7th security failure probe ahead of the court deadline. All right. These are the things going on. What is really going on in Gaza is still there's a lot of fighting. Hamas has not given up. They still launch missiles. All right. The Lebanese terrorists, the Palestinians in Lebanon, all right, still launch missiles, all right, across the border. And of course, Yemen continues to launch missiles across the board. So what's the solution? Okay. Now the Western press, of course, is all pro-Palestinian, so they are they talk to reservists who are upset that the war is still going on, blah blah blah. Well, the war is still going on because they don't want to face what the war is. Okay. They don't want to face who the enemy is. Friendly missiles of peace. They don't want to face who the enemy is, what they're fighting, right? Who they're fighting. If you keep thinking that they're only fighting Hamas, you're wrong. Hamas, and I will say this again, Hamas, ISIS, Al Qaeda, all of those little branch of terrorists, okay, are not the problem. They are created by the problem and given names by the problem. But the problem is the 12th century ideology of the vast majority of the people in that region who have no problem with them. That have no problem believing that these people, that bashing the head of a toddler in is perfectly acceptable if you consider them your enemy. That you can target them. Now, I know a lot of people, especially a lot of freaking libertarians, are like, well, it's no difference. A child died is a child died. Oh, there's a huge difference. One is the child is dying in response to something. The other one is the child is being targeted. You can live next to the guys who are sitting up there and willing to fight, and the child is dying as a response, but they're targeting somebody else. You can't live next to the people who think, okay, I'm just going to take a child whenever I so desire and bash its head in. You can't live with those kinds of people, and you can't live with the people who think that that's acceptable. Because the people who think that that's acceptable eventually will find the ones who are willing to do it and go do it. This is why you see the rise of Hamas. This is why you see the rise of Al Qaeda. Because their mentality is perfectly acceptable to those populations. Well, you know what? You've got to change the minds of those populations. Good morning, Oz. You've got to change the minds of those people. All of them. And I realize that isn't easy to do. Because people as a group, societies as a group, change due to pressure. Pressure has to be applied. That pressure can come from within. That pressure can come from outside external influences. But either way, the only way that the society is going to change is through pressure. Or the lack thereof, by the way. I mean, there's another aspect of that. But Oz is happy. I just went to a gun show and came away with a Winchester 1897. Actually, I need to go to a gun show too, but to pick up for something different. But if you want to know what you're dealing with, here's a good example. Police arrest more than 400 in Istanbul, all right, for May Day showdown. Police arrested more than 400 people in Istanbul, Constantinople, on Thursdays, officials said, amidst a massive show of force to prevent May Day demonstration in Turkey's biggest city. More than 50,000 police were deployed, and key metro bus ferries and ferry services were shut down as part of the operation. May Day came with the government embroiled in a battle with the main opposition Republican People's Party. As soon as you start hearing People's Party of anything, you know it's a communist movement. All right. Following the detention of its presidential candidate, Ekrem İmamoğlu, all right, mayor of Istanbul. İmamoğlu is the biggest political rival of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Does this sound like a bunch of peaceful people, folks? Does this sound like people you can live next to? Does it? You can live next to communists? Are you talking about brainwashing today? No, I'm not talking about brainwashing today. Good morning, Girardi. Let's go around the world for more stuff. He killed a pedophile by scooping out his brain with a spoon and then murdered 3 sex offenders with his hands. Now Britain's most dangerous cannibal has found love in prison with the most jaw-dropping person imaginable. Oh my God. Oh, goodness me. So basically, now, first of all, the guy's in prison for killing people. Are you talking about Jensen by accident? Good morning, TC. Join us if you want. Oh my goodness! No, I'm not talking about Jensen by accident. No, I do find it amusing that you came to that. I did send. I will admit that I did send the story to Jensen. Let's get back to the story. In the 5 decades he has spent behind bars, this guy's been in there for a long time. Robert Maudsley has had plenty of time for writing letters. Missives sent include observation on his favorite television shows, wildlife programs with David Attenborough, right, and requests for improvements to his accommodations. Yeah, I'd like to request an improvement to my cell. Oh my goodness. But this week, a hitherto unseen side of prisoner Alpha 9388 Alpha Alpha emerged. Mosley is in love. My dear sweet Lovinia. The handwritten notes to the 69-year-old he refers to as his girlfriend begins praising her for being there for him and pouring out his thoughts. All the kindness, thoughtfulness, and love you have shared with me through these last short years can get me through anything, he writes. My beautiful Lavinia, right? The more love we experience in our lives, the more the bad experiences tend to fade into the distance, and we can live our lives in full. The letters are signed off with the name Bob and are always followed by 3 kisses. My dear sweet Castlevania. Ah, Hello, stop the real news fast. I just saw the cutest, bestest good boy at PetSmart. A black lab with legs and the height of a basset hound. Legs up, black lab, full proportions. Legs down, the basset hound. Oh my god. Oh, here. There, Miss Murder. We'll take you away from your previously your previous things. To pet the dog. A little bit of fan service for you. Oh, now I'll be honest with you. This guy was killing sex offenders. I kind of am not sorry. Just putting it out there. Just putting it out there. Good morning to you all. Well, by the way, if you guys want to join, feel free to join. Right? You can just pop on in if you want. On to the next story. Woman dies when a bomb she is carrying explodes in the Greek city of Thessalonica. Or Lanika. Lanika. Okay? I'm not trying to butcher it. I don't speak Greek. Right? Thessalonia. I would have called it Thessalonia, but I guess that's not how you pronounce it. A woman was killed early Saturday in the northern Greek city, right, when a bomb she was carrying exploded in her hands, police said. The 38-year-old woman apparently was carrying the bomb to place outside a nearby bank at 5 a.m., police said. Several storefronts and vehicles were damaged by the explosion. Police said that the woman, who they did not publicly identify, had a criminal record related to drugs and prostitution and had been involved in at least one robbery and thefts in the past. The Greek's police division for organized crime was investigating the incident, while authorities were also investigating whether the woman might have had ties to an extreme leftist groups. Greece has seen occasional bombings as well as targeted killings attributed to various organized crime groups. The country also has a long history of politically motivated violence dating back to the 1970s, with domestic extremist groups carrying out small-scale bombings that usually cause some damage but rarely lead to injuries. Really? uh, while groups most active in the 1980s and 1990s, whose preferred targets tended to be politicians, foreign businesses, and diplomats, have been dismantled, small groups have emerged. In other words, communists haven't gone away. In April, a new group calling itself the Revolutionary Class Struggle claimed responsibility for a bomb that exploded in central Athens near the offices of Hellenic Train, Greece's main railway services operator, and the planting of another bomb near the Labor Ministry, in early February. Explosions near the train offices resulted in limited damages to the building and no injuries. It has been previously preceded by an anonymous call to local media 40 minutes before the blast warning about the device, leading police to evacuate and cordon off the area. The group claimed responsibility, said the bombing was part of an armed struggle against the state. Because Greece now is going to become quite a bit more violent. Why is that, Nomad? Why would Greece? Because. Just because. No. The reason is because they're running out of other people's money. When you run out of other people's money, these things seem to happen more and more often. Just pointing it out there. Meanwhile, masked protester attacks socialists at France May Day rally. All black-clad protesters harassed marching lawmakers and supporters of France's moderate-left Socialist Party on Thursday, marring Paris's Labor Day procession as hundreds of thousands rallied across the country. International Worker Day rallies across France drew more than 300,000 on Thursday, including 100,000 in Paris. The CGT trade union told AFP, while police put the figures at around 157,000. Police said that the Paris procession, where AFP journalists saw protesters covered in black clothing, roughly jostling Paris socialist politicians and activists, drew 32,000, while the march in the capital largely passed off without incident, a largely peaceful protest. Socialist lawmakers complained of being assaulted with punches and flares, leading to dozens of arrests in the afternoon. Everyone hates the socialists, chanted protesters, some of whom were carrying far-left anti-fascist flags, according to the AFP. All right? The PS is regularly accused of betrayal by the left and hard left. Gee, I wonder what this one's about. So it's the woke turning on the woke, because they as well are running out of other people's money. Just pointing it out there. Another criminal story where I'm not really sure I totally condemn the perpetrator. Husband busted over fight with the thermostat. An 87-year-old Florida man was arrested yesterday for domestic battery after tangling with his wife when she sought to turn the air conditioner down in the couple's residence, police allege. All right, you can understand why this might provoke the guy who's probably freezing to death, and his wife says, "It's too hot in here." Long a source of marital strife, control of the thermostat triggered a 7 a.m. confrontation Monday between Charles Ingram and his 85-year-old spouse, according to the arrest affidavit. Investigators said Ingram returned to the couple's St. Petersburg home and argued with the victim, his wife, about the air conditioner. So he came home after a while, and it was freezing. The woman touched the thermostat to turn the air down, prompting Ingram to allegedly push the victim away from the thermostat against the wall. When questioned by police, he reportedly admitted to pushing her first, and then stated that the victim pushed him back.
Hold up. Who the fuck is picking a fight at that ungodly hour?
An 87-year-old man and his 85-year-old wife. That's murder. Welcome.
Okay, so Burma's, yeah, that tracks.
I'm not sure you could
By the
call.
way,
I'm not sure you could call them boomers. They're below. They're before boomers. You're talking Biden territory.
either way, only old fuckers would actually fight that goddamn early in the morning.
It is Florida. It does
You
start to get
couldn't
warm.
You could not get me to fight anyone that early in the morning.
It's something to look forward to.
I don't care how much you're offering me. You could not get me to fight my ex at that ungodly hour. Also, Nomad, I'm just going to reiterate what I said in chat. The news that I shared in the chat is way more important than any news that you have.
Hey, I didn't disagree. I'm not going to agree, but I won't disagree with you either.
That dog was the cutest damn thing on the planet, and if I'm saying it with my reputation, it must be true.
So you want to become a dog lover now?
I have always loved dogs. I just don't want to have one in my house because, well, I don't exactly have my own place, number one. And number two, I feel bad enough leaving my cat home alone for 8+ hours a day. And that's a very independent animal.
Yeah, well, that's
I would feel like absolute garbage leaving such a pack-dependent animal alone for 8+ hours a day.
Yeah. That you know they'll be happy every time you return. You can look at it that way.
Yeah, but that's still not fair to the animal.
Yeah, that might be true.
Is my point.
That's probably true. Hello, TM.
Because I know my cat's gonna be fine. My cat will be fine.
Relatively, yes.
If I disappear for 8 hours, my cat's gonna be like, "Oh, you're back? Okay, cool. Feed me."
Well, exactly.
Can go and do his own thing, but also, as far as the individual who murdered the sex offenders, why is he in jail?
Because he murdered 4 of them and then ate them.
Again, I ask, why is he in prison?
Hey, I mean, he killed 4 people.
I don't see. I am failing to see what exactly he did wrong by murdering sex offenders.
I think scooping out the brains to eat them was a problem.
Again, other than the fact that I'm a little worried that he might have, gotten crew. Which
mad cow disease.
Yeah, it's essentially mad cow disease for humans.
Yeah. Let's get out of.
Individuals wondering if you are going to do a thing where you may or may not be consuming what is known as long pork. Do avoid the spinal fluid, brains, and skin, because that is very unhealthy for you.
Public safety announcements by Myth Murder.
My moniker is Miss Murder, and I am defending the actions of someone who is killing sex offenders. This should not surprise or shock anyone.
just announcing the public service announcement. Let's get out of the next story.
I'm just saying, my boy did nothing wrong. Let him go.
Lab animals face being euthanized as Trump cuts research. On April 1st, the Trump administration's effort
to...
What?
I'm going to stop you there. You said killing lab animals. How about we just kill the person who cut the funding?
You're asking for. You're saying that you want to do something, do the president in? Is that what you're doing?
That is not what I said.
It's the Trump administration.
I said the individual who cut the funding and is causing the death of millions of innocent animals.
How is he causing the death of millions of innocent animals that are there for research?
All I'm saying is that we don't have to test on animals when there are perfectly good pedophiles that are in prison right now.
Well, but that's not a
There are also
that's
perfectly
not a
good rapists in prison.
that's not a government / funding effort here. So,
I'm just saying we have perfectly available, perfectly good rapists and pedophiles that are in prison right now who are sitting there not contributing to society, doing nothing, and they could be contributing to society.
now, human testing is considered unethical. Just ask.
I'm going to just refer back to the fact that my moniker on this platform is Miss Murder, and I'm just going to remind you when have I ever been ethical?
I'm just pointing these out to you. The Trump administration's effort to slash government funding arrived in Morgantown, West Virginia, where federal scientists spent their days studying health and safety threats to the American workers. That morning, hundreds of employees at the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health were notified that they were being terminated and would lose access to the building. Left behind were more than 900 lab animals. The Institute ultimately managed to relocate about two-thirds of them, primarily mice, as well as a handful of rats, sending them to university labs, according to two facility employees who were recently terminated. If you were recently terminated, how do you know? The remaining 300 animals, however, were euthanized last week. Over the last few months, the Trump administration has taken aim at American research enterprise, firing scores of federal scientists, rescinding active research grants, and proposing drastic cuts to funding that helps labs keep their lights on. Because of what? These labs should not be operating. Or am I missing something?
What are they researching?
What
are they researching?
This is OSHA.
What are they researching?
It doesn't tell you. They were, but the fact that OSHA is running a lab with lab animals, occupational safety and health. Why would you ever need lab animals? Why would OSHA ever need lab animals? Can somebody tell me that?
I can't answer that. I can, however, answer the fact that I do believe that those 300 little furry scientists should be avenged.
How do you know they didn't just jump off a ladder so they needed another sticker on it? That's the only thing OSHA's ever been good for. Because the only other thing that they've ever. I am
saying that those furry little babies deserve to be avenged.
Just pointing this out to you.
Because animals are awesome and people suck.
Yeah. People are animals too. Don't forget that. People are animals too.
They are, but they
the
suck.
Trebuchet, the test pilots.
They are animals, but they have both sentience and sapience. And I think I'm allowed to hate my own species. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Sentience is a might be a bit more.
I know. That's a stretch for most people. I know because I work with a lot of them, and I've worked retail.
Well, that in that sentence it's also a bit much for human beings in some cases too. But that's a separate issue.
I'm not saying people are dumb. I'm just saying that a lot of them, if reincarnation is a thing, a lot of them were definitely the brainless jellyfish.
You sure they weren't just a paramecium at the beginning?
Jellyfish don't have brains.
Neither do paramecium.
And I believe that gives hope to too many people.
So your disagreement is the fact that it gives hope to people.
My disagreement is the fact that jellyfish don't have brains, ergo, we have a lot of stupid people who are out there voting, breeding, and driving on roads, and they don't need to be doing that.
Well, that's true, and I think you're correct, PC. All right, let's get started with this. 3 Hegseth aides ousted in leak investigation decry baseless attacks. 3 former senior advisors.
What kind of AIDS?
3 former senior advisors to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth decried on Saturday that what they could call baseless attacks after each was escorted from the Pentagon in an expanding probe on information leaks. Dan Cadwell, a Hegseth aide, Colin Carroll, Chief of Staff to the Deputy Defense Secretary, and Stephen Feinberg, all right, and Darren Selnick, Hegseth's Deputy Chief of Staff, were among 4 officials in Hegseth's inner circle who were ousted this past week. While the 3 initially had been placed on leave pending the investigation, a joint statement shared by Caldwell on X said the 3 were incredibly disappointed by the manner in which our service at the Department of Defense ended. This is where you have to start cleaning house, because the leftists infest all of the bureaucracy. The federal bureaucracy is infested with these people. To be honest, this should just be a good start. You got to get rid of the DoD civilians. If you're in the Defense Department, please explain to me why you have to have DoD civilians.
Okay, can you explain to me what that is? Because being a civilian, I don't fully understand it.
You have the Department of Defense. Okay, so you have
it's the Department of Defense, but I'm not entirely sure what it does outside of something vaguely to do with the military.
Well, basically, it runs all military operations. It used to be called the Department of War. All right, these are the people that were supposedly responsible for the military security of the nation.
So what I'm getting is they're the reason why a lot of the military grade stuff and housing all suck.
Partly, yeah.
Okay.
Partly, yeah.
And I've seen military housing. I know enough about the military to know that anything that they call military grade basically means it's the biggest piece of shit on the planet.
Military grade means it's 10 years behind civilian grade, at least. At least.
Unless it's a plane or going to the Air Force.
Even if it's a plane going to the Air Force, those things are way behind where the actual technology is. People don't know that. People are really unaware of just how far back we are.
Anytime the news uses military grade anything, I'm like, why are you saying that?
Well, there are some positive military
grade. Crap.
Not always. I mean, when it comes to things like tools and things like that, military grade tools are superior to it.
Okay, aside from the K-bar. I have tried an MRE, okay?
If you think MREs are bad, you have failed.
It is amazing. It is amazing what they can do with plastic nowadays, but I don't think edible plastic is the solution.
That's because you've never had a K-ration.
I had the MRE and I had the opportunity to have a K-ration and I passed on it because I'm like, if the MRE is this bad, I don't want to know what the fuck that is.
See, you failed to understand. If you were eating K-rations and then get the MRE, your appreciation of the MRE goes up leaps and bounds.
Okay. I bet it does. But I'm also terrified of the MRE coffee.
Well, the MRE coffee is...
No. That is a liquid laxative, and you cannot convince me otherwise.
It's not even useful. It's useful to spark things, though. Just putting it out there. Burns well. Just putting it out there.
I mean, so do Doritos, but... Don't ask me how I know this.
Cause of Spain's power outage still unclear after mass blackouts and travel chaos. Life in Spain and Portugal began to return to normal on Tuesday, a day after a massive power outage paralyzed the Iberian Peninsula, leaving the governments, companies, and experts scrambling to figure out what went wrong. As questions build, it may take weeks before the blackout cause is clear. This cannot happen again, said President Sanchez of Spain. Yeah, it can. Especially if the reason for the blackout, that has been given since this article, which was the shifting magnetic pole caused the blackout. I'm not exaggerating. That's the latest theory. The shifting magnetic pole caused the Iberian Peninsula to black out. I would say that your power grid has other problems. I would say that the design of your power grid is substandard if a shifting magnetic pole caused a power outage. I'm just
That sounds like Texas's power grid.
Well, Texas power grid was because, quite frankly, they went to green energy, and guess what happens when the wind stops, or if it becomes too cold, and the windmills don't turn because they're frozen.
I mean, I lived in Ohio where it's like 85% windmill versus the population.
Are you saying your windmills didn't freeze?
I'm not saying that they didn't freeze. I'm just saying that I think they're a good backup source. Like, they'll do in a pinch. Yeah. However, I don't entirely trust them.
The only look, power is power. If you're going to have to do something, it's a trade-off no matter how you look at it. Whatever power source you decide to utilize, it's going to be a trade-off, right? But if you're really serious about it, we're going to have to go nuclear. But that's a separate issue.
I mean, the only thing I'm worried about is like a second Chernobyl. But considering that happened in Russia, and I have a pretty okay idea of how Russia works and how it maintains its infrastructure, aka how it doesn't maintain its infrastructure.
You realize you're talking.
I think we would do okay. I think we would do significantly better than that as long as we like put the power plants like in Montana or something.
Okay, Chernobyl happened. There were a lot of things that attributed to Chernobyl. Okay.
I know that's what I'm saying.
And if it comes down to a series of everything going wrong, possibly that could go wrong. Okay. One of the last things that went wrong that people don't know about is they hit the button, all right, to immediately throw all the control rods back down after they had pulled them all out. Okay, now I can hear people going, Nomad, what if they put the control rods back in? I mean, that was the whole purpose of it. Yeah, the problem with the emergency push to bring the control rods back in was that the bottom part of the control rods were carbon, were basically graphite.
Ew.
And graphite actually increased the reaction that much more.
That would be a problem.
Especially when you do it through 80 of them going in simultaneously. And so that was the final straw. But there was a number of things that were part of it. That design failure, that idea of a design in and of itself was stupid. Okay. I'm just pointing that out.
I understand that a little bit. Now, I was not a great student when it came to high school physics. But even I have a pretty vague idea that, if you're gonna make something that's, gonna be like nuclear and like highly combustible, you might want to avoid carbon.
Well, the other aspect of the carbon is that it increases the reaction within nuclear reactors.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That was like a kind of a big part of one of the lessons that I remember is that if you're going nuclear, avoid fucking carbon
Well,
because carbon makes shit go boom.
to be honest, you can use it in two ways. It's actually not necessarily a negative thing. Depends on how you use it. But for example, if you're using carbon as one of the materials to increase the reaction, okay, rather than using it as a material as just a different material to use as how do I put this
Wait, wasn't that
mechanical
going on
material.
like right around like when the USSR was still kind of sort of
Oh yeah, the USSR was still a thing then. It was before the fall of the wall.
okay? So you're mixing Soviet Union with essentially a giant fucking nuclear thing that can just say, go fuck yourself.
Well, there's like one of these days I'll go into it a lot more with somebody, but it's a very interesting. The study of what happened at Chernobyl is quite interesting. It really is, from my perspective. But then
But no,
again,
I've read about it. I've read about it. It is very fascinating, and massive, massive props and respect to the individuals who actually risked their lives and lost their lives going in there to actually help with the effort to make sure that it didn't spread further and actually document it and shit.
hey, James.
Yeah, massive.
Yeah, I agree that most industrial equipment has big, large emergency stop buttons. Okay, but they weren't designed the same way that they were. The rods. It wasn't the emergency stop button per se that was doing it to put the control rods back in. It was the fact that the bottom part of the control rods were graphite. All right, that was the problem, and once again, that was one of the problems. There was a series of problems that were going on. Okay, and human failures were a large part of that as well. So, but let's get on to the next story, shall we? Alrighty. UN calls for safety of journalists in Somalia. Really? Somalia only, huh? Somalia on Saturday joined the rest of the international community in marking World Press Freedom Day, with a senior United Nations official calling for the safety of journalists working in the country. How about the safety of journalists working in, I don't know, Gaza? Well, what about the safety of journalists working in, I don't know, Mexico? What? We're going to worry about the Somalian journalists? I mean, let's be honest. You want to see some journalists taken care of? I can tell you right now, if you talk about safety of journalists, don't go to Saudi Arabia.
Maybe they're
Iran?
going with Somalia. Maybe they're going with Somalia because that's like out of all of them, that would probably be the easiest to deal with.
James Swan, a special representative.
Think about it.
Yeah, I
Think
agree.
about it for a minute. That might be the easiest one to tackle first.
James Swan, a special representative of the United Nations Secretary General for Somalia, also stressed the importance of public access to information. In view of the key role of independent media as Somalia rebuilds and develops, journalists must be able to carry out their vital work safely, free from harassment and intimidation, Swan said in a statement issued in Mogadishu, the capital of Somalia. This year, World Press Freedom Day focused on the profound impact of artificial intelligence in journalism.
Oh, so the journalists are using AI to what? Write their articles?
Basically, yes. AI is writing their articles. What are you talking about? The AI are the articles.
I thought they were just. I thought that was just something that we all just accepted. Like, I've just kind of expected this shit for like ever since AI first came out. Like, I just assumed that that's what they were doing.
You watch The Simpsons, Jen. I'm still standing on the idea of drunk citizens having the culpability in the system. I'm not saying that isn't an aspect. Okay.
I'm just saying I haven't trusted journalism since I literally took a journalism class in high school.
Well, when you talk about journalists anyway, I think artificial intelligence is the only way to describe them because that's the only thing that they have going for them.
I'm more surprised that they're just saying, "Oh yeah, they're using it now." I've just expected them to be using it for like, past like what 5-10 years.
Yeah, basically. By the way, here's another story to warm your cockles, Ms. Berger. South African woman convicted of kidnapping and selling her 6-year-old daughter.
Killer in the street.
A South African woman was convicted Friday of kidnapping and selling her 6-year-old daughter in a case that horrified the country. The girl went missing more than a year ago and hasn't been found. Kelly Smith and 2 men, her boyfriend and their friend, were convicted of kidnapping and human trafficking over the disappearance of Smith's daughter, Jocelyn, who was 6 when she went missing in February of 2024. Smith, whose full name is Raquel Chantel Smith, was initially a figure of sympathy when her daughter went missing. Community members rallied around her and volunteered to help police search for Jocelyn in the sand dunes near their poor neighborhood of shacks close to the west coast town of Saldanha Bay, around 120 kilometers north of Cape Town. A photograph of Jocelyn smiling with her hair tied in pigtails was broadcast by the news stations across South Africa as police then launched a nationwide manhunt. She said she left Jocelyn with her boyfriend on the day she disappeared, but the case took a shocking twist when Smith was arrested. A woman testified during the trial that Smith had told her that she and 2 men had sold Jocelyn for around $1,000 to a traditional healer who wanted the child for her body parts.
Okay, that doesn't even surprise me. That's not the surprising part. Okay, that tells you just how deep into the fucked up aspects of the human psyche that I've actually been in. All right, that's actually relatively common of a reason for children to be sold in Africa. Especially if the child is albino.
Well, I don't think the child was albino in this case, but I don't think
I'm just adding that as like an extra factoid. But so the reasoning that put it this way. That was my second thought as to why this woman sold her child.
Well, she sold her child for money. I mean, but the fact that she sold it to someone who was going to piece apart.
But the reason for the child being sold, aside from money, like that's what the parent's getting. But why is the child having a purchase value in the first place? My first thought was, sex trafficking. Second thought, wait, this is Africa. Body parts.
Yeah. People attending the trial cheered and applauded when Judge Nathan Ermas read out the guilty verdicts. The trial was held in the Saldanha Bay Sports Center that had more room space than a courtroom so that members of the community could also attend. So the trial was now a sporting event. Not sure I disagree with this.
I mean, actually, that's pretty nice of the judge in the court to actually say, hey, we want all you motherfuckers to see what happens.
I kind of agree with that.
Personally, I think anytime that crime involves a child being the victim, it should be held in the biggest available area so everyone can watch and everyone can see it, and then we can just go medieval style on their ass.
It's been confirmed, James.
Bring back public executions. We'll straighten out a lot of people real fucking fast.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why you gotta get rid of these people. This is one of the reasons why I'm against abortion, because it's the lack of sensitivity towards life. But we're not going to go into an abortion ruling or abortion discussion.
No, let's not, because you and me are going to get into a fight.
Yeah, and you're going to lose, but that's a separate issue. Powerball winner! Powerball winner behind bars for battering a cop. You won the Powerball lottery. Why the hell would you go out there and batter a cop?
I kind of understand why, and I'm just going to say this to all of my broke people. Yes, I'm broke too. Okay, so the whole money equals power thing, okay, you kind of have to have the money for like a couple generations for that to actually take an effect. You have to be able to buy a politician or two. That's how that works, okay? It's a pay-to-play.
Days after winning...
It's got levels to this.
Days after claiming the $167 million Powerball jackpot, a Kentucky man is behind bars charged with kicking a cop in the face during a melee at an oceanfront hotel in Florida. According to the court records, James Farthing, a 50-year-old ex-convict, of course you have to throw that in there, was arrested Tuesday evening on felony and misdemeanor charges in connection with a fracas at the Tradewinds Resort in St. Pete Beach. Farthing was at the resort with Jacqueline Fightmaster. What a last name, Fightmaster.
Okay, where did this happen again?
Tradewinds, Florida. He's from Kentucky.
Yep, called it.
He's a Kentucky man from Florida. He's from Kentucky in Florida, right? His 42-year-old girlfriend was seen above.
Fucking called it.
Farthing and Fightmaster appeared Tuesday in the Kentucky Lottery press conference announcing the Powerball win, which he is splitting with his 77-year-old mother. Farthing, who won the April 26th Powerball, purchased the winning ticket from Clark's Pumpkin Shop in Georgetown, a city 15 miles north of Lexington. And so you go to celebrate your Powerball winnings by going to a resort in Florida, a high-end resort in Florida. You go with your girlfriend, Fightmaster, and surprise, surprise, surprise, you get into a fight. Surprise, surprise, surprise, the cop showed up.
I mean, that money's going to be really nice in commissary. I'm just saying.
He was traded under the Fightmaster.
At least he's going to... Depending on what kind of felony is, you know, at least his current crime, he's going in with a good jacket. Silver lining, people. Silver lining.
Farthing's supervision in Kentucky stems from his conviction and a 14-year prison term for an assortment of felonies, including theft, receiving stolen property, drug trafficking, promoting contraband, escaping, tampering with physical evidence, and engaging in organized criminal syndicate. He was granted parole in 2014 and subsequently returned to custody 3 separate times for violating terms of the release.
Okay, so respectable. Okay, I can respect that.
His term he was last paroled in 2023. All right, his term of supervision was scheduled to end in late August of 2025. Guess what?
Bro, that's like getting your wife pregnant after the kid just turned 18. God damn. That's just another life sentence right there. Come on, motherfucker. You were almost out. I mean, I get it, but still.
Let's get on to the next story here. Snake causes power outage. Tokyo, Osaka, Shinkansen services disrupted. I don't know what Shinkansen.
What the fuck was that? It just sounded like word vomit.
Shinkansen. Shinkansen. Services were
Fuck,
temporary.
we need an anime nerd here. Unfortunately, Jensen can't be here. He doesn't have a voice.
Services were temporarily disrupted Wednesday on a Tokaido. All right, bullet train. Okay, so it's a bullet train line. All right, connecting Tokyo and
okay.
Osaka.
Just call it a bullet train then.
All right, so the bullet train line going from Tokyo to Osaka after a snake tangled in the overhead wires and caused a power outage. The incident occurred between Gifu Hashima.
That is the most Florida Australian bullshit happening in Japan I've ever heard.
Services resumed around 7 p.m. after safety conditions were confirmed, the Railroad Central said. So the snakes are now stopping the trains, probably at the cost of its own life.
I mean, that's actually not that unbelievable. That can actually happen quite a lot. My sister, she lives in Texas, and that's actually a common occurrence that happens down there. See, when the temperature drops,
Mr. Barkley, snakes on a train.
No. The thing is that when the temperatures drop, and especially like right now, where it's springtime in the northern hemispheres of the world, all the snakes are coming out of their hibernation.
Yeah, that's true.
But they're still really cold, so they're gonna go and find somewhere that's really warm, really dark, and where there's gonna be a lot of mice and rats.
Well, hopping onto the.
Funny enough, that's a train station is a pretty damn good place for that.
Yeah, maybe, but I think it got a little too warm. Even snakes are committed suicide. I think you guys have been whispering things there. The squirrel entities have been whispering things to the snakes. McDonald's suffers worst U.S. sales decline since 2020, warns of anti-American sentiment abroad.
I wonder why.
McDonald's reported its worst quarterly sales for the United States since the height of the pandemic in 2020, the latest restaurant chain to be affected by America's turbulent economic environment. The burger giant reported U.S. same-store sales fell 3.6%, the largest three-month drop since quarter 2 of 2020, when they plunged 8.7%. Forecasts had been for decline of just 1.7%. So basically over twice what they expected.
I can tell you why.
Well, let's go over what they're saying it is. Customers or consumers today are grappling with uncertainty, said McDonald's chairman and CEO Chris Kempczynski, in a statement as the chain cited lower guest counts. In a follow-up call with investors, McDonald's executives said that traffic among middle-income diners fell by nearly double digits alongside an outgoing drop-off among low-income ones. As an example, he said, more people appear to be skipping breakfast entirely to cut back on spending or eating breakfast at home. Okay. Now go into yours.
First of all, no shit. Secondly, number one, McDonald's forgot the fact that they got popular with the lower class economic status people, not because their food was good, but because it was cheap. Okay? That was the catch. That was the hook, that it was cheap. Number one, okay? You didn't go to McDonald's because it was good food or because it was healthy. It was because you had $10 to your name and you hadn't eaten in 3 days, okay? That was their gimmick, and then they decided that they were going to jack up the prices about 4 times in a single, fiscal year. On top of that, and this is just my personal opinion, also, the guy who shot the CEO was turned in by a McDonald's employee. All right, snitches get stitches, motherfuckers. All right,
We're gonna
that's
just
just my
we're
personal
gonna
opinion. I'm not saying it's everybody's,
we
but
we
I'm
have
saying that probably didn't help.
yeah. Well, we have a disagreement with that, and we also have a story with that idiot coming up too. So you can
But no,
we wait for
I'm not
that.
done with the McDonald's thing. More important things. Also, at the same time, and this is actually something that I've heard from both my parents and a lot of the older generations. A lot of the older generations don't like the fact that they can't get a cashier anymore in a lot of the McDonald's places. And I've been seeing it a lot. All right? You have to order your own food by doing the stupid touchscreen things that almost never work. And a lot of older generations, I'm sorry, they don't know how to do that. They don't want to learn how to do that. You're isolating the only people who actually have money. My generation certainly doesn't have fucking money. We're a little bit busy just trying to pay for rent.
I hate
So,
those machines
yeah.
with a passion.
Go fuck yourself, McDonald's. Remember who you were catering to in the first place.
Hey, a lot of this. I'm not excusing McDonald's 100% on this, right? But you also can't overlook the fact that a lot of this has to do with the massive increase, right, in minimum wage, and
Yes and no.
no, it's not yes and no.
Because-
It is. A lot of it has to do. This whole thing. You don't want cashiers. Why don't they want cashiers? Because it's cheaper to put in those stupid screens. Okay, it's cheaper.
Well, they've been putting in those stupid screens for a while, long
Right,
before
because
the
the
minimum
cost.
wage went up.
Well, no, it had been going up. You missed when minimum. You were never around when minimum wage was $1.50. Okay.
Yeah, and at the same time, a loaf of bread was like 10 cents, and
No.
you could buy a starter home for 50,000.
No, loaf of bread was 50 cents. It was you could buy homes for 50,000. I agree. All right,
Okay,
not
you
in.
know what those starter homes cost now?
I do. I understand that. All right, but a lot of that has to do with the people that the young people wanted in. People can argue what you want, but the leftists are the ones who did this, and a good portion of the youth were tilted, and still even to this day still tilted way to the left, and they wanted these kind of policies. They pushed these kind of policies.
Here's the thing, though. Economics is not really taught in schools, number one. How things actually work isn't really taught in schools, number two.
All right, who's in charge? Stop right there. Who's in charge of the schools? Who predominantly? That would be the government and the teachers themselves, and the predominant number of teachers are what? Right-wing conservatives? No. 80 to 90% of them are leftists.
Actually, in my school there were. In my school there actually were.
you were then in the outlier school. The vast majority of those people, as part of the teachers unions, are hardcore leftists.
No, I'm not saying that they aren't, and I'm not arguing politics with
you.
So
once again, it comes down to the same thing. You're saying that people aren't teaching that economics in schools. I agree. Why? Because because the people in charge of those schools, the people who are running these things,
they don't want them to be smart. They don't want them to be independent thinkers.
Right. Well, because it affects
them to.
They want to be controlled. This is their methodology of control.
No, and I agree, but I also believe that it's not just one side. I believe it's both sides. Both sides want control. What's easiest to control? The masses who are well educated and are independent thinkers, or masses who can be misled very easily. It's basic human behavior.
When you say you don't understand the difference between you don't know what a conservative is, because conservatives aren't looking at control. They want minimal federal control. True conservatives do not want an overarching government. They want limited government. If you have limited government, you have limited control.
You said true conservatives,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll agree with you there. True conservatives don't. However, I don't believe that the vast majority of those who are in power and who claim to be conservatives, I don't believe that they are of that mindset. They are not true conservatives.
I tend to agree with that too. The state is a leftist religion.
Well, and here's my reason. Why would they want minimal control if that minimal control would mean that they wouldn't be able to do whatever the hell they wanted?
That doesn't make any sense.
I mean, I'm oversimplifying it here, but I'm also going on the fact that those in power want to keep the power. Okay? Regardless of the politics, just strip away any difference in politics. If someone has a lot of power, they want to keep that power for as long as possible. Correct?
To a point. I'd agree.
Okay. So the easiest way to do that would be more of illusion of control for the masses. I'm not going off of politics. I am going off of me being a massive history buff and going off of the behaviors of dictators and individuals who, had power and wanted to keep that power. The best way to control a large group of people is in a few ways. Number one is an us versus them mentality. Divide and conquer, essentially.
Well, that's different.
Easily.
Divide and conquer is a little bit different. But to an us versus them.
But you understand.
Is
you
a way.
Understand what I'm getting at, though.
I do, but an us versus them kind of a situation is something that it's very much a tactic of the dictatorial class.
It's a generalized tactic. I've seen the left use it. I've seen the right use it.
When have you seen the right use it?
It is very viable.
When have you seen the right use it? I guarantee you haven't seen it because you don't know what the right is.
Yeah, I have seen them use it because they use the same kind of language, the same kind of rallying points of, we are going to do this for the country. We are going to do this for the country. The left over there, they're doing this and it's horrible. They're doing this and it's horrible.
All right, stop right there. But no. See, now you're playing the pox on both houses game. You're not looking at the actual facts. All right. The difference between hold on a sec, because you're saying that the tactic is the same, but it's not. And the difference is, if I'm telling you what the left is actually doing, and they are doing this, and what the left is actually intending to do, and they are doing it, okay, that's just calling a spade a spade. That's not engaging in the dishonest blame game of saying, okay, I'm trying to divide both sides. You're pointing something out. Just because you're pointing something out, the intent is not the same. And so you can't sit up there and look at that. You can't sit up there and try and play with that pox on both houses game and throw up your hands. You can't do that. Okay, if you take a look at what the left is claiming that Trump is trying to do, there's nothing the left has said that Trump is trying to do that he's actually trying to do. The intent behind Trump's things are not what the left has said. But what Trump has said the left is doing is. All right, but it's not the same. You're saying that they engaged in the same tactic, and it's not accurate.
As a generalized, and I'm stressing this, a very oversimplified, generalized.
In other words,
It is the same.
It isn't the same.
Same basic principle. It is not the same intent. It is not meant to be the same intent. It is not
It's
even
not the same.
in a remotely similar way.
It's not the same principle.
It is a similar tactic.
No, it's not, because it's not meant to keep you in power. Okay, your claim is that they do it for the purpose of staying in power, which the left is very adroit at. Okay? But the right is not doing that for the purpose of staying in power. Okay, so you can't, when you use statements like that. All right, my problem with the youth, and you are hardly the only one. All right, because this is the same kind of tactic that Jeremy at the Quartering uses, the same type of tactic that Styx Hexenhammer uses as well. Is they want to paint the both sides so that they can try and claim middle ground here. Right, and believe it or not, I'm not accusing you of doing that, because I know that's not what your intent was. Okay, but that's because I have a relationship with you. But the fact is when you play that Pox on Both Houses game, what you let go, okay, is the left to continue to do what they're doing in a dishonest, disreputable manner, and continuing to slide for more.
I'm not saying that the left is right. I'm not saying that it's correct. Because that particular tactic of the us versus them is just it's a bare bones at its very core. It's just a tactic. That's all it is. It's not. It doesn't have any good or bad connotations. It's just a very bare bones political tactic used to get votes, and that's really all it is. That's literally all I'm saying.
No, but it isn't just used to get votes. It isn't just used to manipulate to manipulate the
It can be used
intent.
in any way they want. It can be used to manipulate. It can be used to get
votes. But you're playing.
It can even be used as an educational tool.
Once again, however, intent is the priority here. Once again, is the intent.
I agree. Intent
but you can't.
Is the priority. I very much agree.
But to say that the left and the right both engage in it puts them on the same false equivalency. You can't do that.
It is not on the same level.
Oh, but then why did you when you mention it like you did in a generic context and say both sides engage in it? All right, you put them at the same level.
I am oversimplifying it, and I am very generalizing it, and it was not my main point. That's why I said it the way I did. Okay.
Good news: George Floyd has been drug free for the past few years.
Okay. Either way, moving on from that, the other tactic that is mostly used is, and this I am applying to both sides because, honestly, and you know me, I'm pretty much in the middle when it comes to politics. When it comes to wanting my taxes done, I want a right-leaning motherfucker, okay? I want them as far right as humanly possible doing my taxes, okay? When it comes to my personal health care, because I am a woman, I want someone who is on the far left.
You're an idiot.
Because personally, I don't want anyone but me and my doctors.
That's not a leftist comment. That right there is what is one of the problems that you have. Is you think that the left are ensuring that, and they're not. All because of one issue. All because of your belief on a single issue. You believe that the left, all right, is somehow ensuring all the things about your doctor, all right, is taken care of. Instead of seeing the damage that they've been doing, all right, across the board with that. You excuse it because of a single issue. You're a single issue voter when it comes right down to it on that. Because you can't sit up and I try to say this, that there is a consequence of doing that. And when you apply and tell me that the left is cares more about healthcare and the damage that they've done to the healthcare system in this country? You're going to complain about the cost of healthcare, of what it takes to sit up there and help people, and all the other things, which is a direct result of your support for the leftists in healthcare? Are you kidding me?
Can I finish, or are you going to keep yelling?
I'll probably keep yelling, but don't worry about it.
Let me finish. Yes, it is on that one issue, because being a woman, that does concern me.
No. It concerns you. Not because you're a woman. It concerns you as an individual. Because if I brought my wife in here to discuss this with you, you would find out as a woman, she totally disagrees with you.
No, and that's fine. That is absolutely
so
right
don't
to
try to claim the moniker of it's a woman. Do you see my point? And I'm browbeating you, and I apologize. I am going a little bit too hard on you.
No, but here's the thing. On that very specific issue, I very much believe that it should be up to that individual woman, that individual person, and their doctors.
No, but that specific issue isn't just about you and that individual person, and you know that.
I do, but I also know that there are very scary consequences.
There are scary consequences
not being available.
No. All those scary consequences, when you're looking at it, all approach to one individual, how you think of it as a scary consequence. As an individual, you ignore the societal consequences of that. You totally ignore it.
We will never agree on that individual issue. Now, right. I still love you to death.
Can we go on to the next story now?
From that.
Okay, time to go on to the next story.
I don't feel like arguing with that. Yeah.
Trump's attempt to upend the global order has already been defeated. Oh, has it, Jeremy? It seems unlikely that
Can you repeat that one more time? You kind of cut off.
Trump's attempt to upend the global order has already been defeated. Jeremy Warner. America has emerged from the...
I gotta hear this.
America has emerged from the trade war as an international laughingstock. Keep going. It seems unlikely that President Donald Trump has read much Lenin. Gee. All right. But he has done so... But had he done so, he might have stumbled across the following observation. It takes organizers to make a revolution. Characterized by screeching handbrake turns and made-up policy on the hoof and mixed-up messaging on steroids, it's been another week of chaos in Washington. If anyone knows what on earth it is that the U.S. is trying to achieve on trade and much else besides, I'd like to hear from them. If you want to, all right, all you have to do is listen to what he says. Jeremy, and if you guys on the left keep laughing, oh, here's the international laughing stock. Keep laughing. Laugh it up. Yuck it up. You guys in the international community, yuck it up. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I actually do have a question for that, because I don't personally understand it, which is why I don't speak on it. Because if I don't understand something, I'm not going to fully speak on it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that's my policy for quite a bit. So I don't understand the tariff thing. Could you please explain that to me? I don't understand.
Which aspect of the tariff thing do you want me to go into?
Just in general. Like, okay. I understand, like, other countries are paying more for American products that are being imported.
No,
yes?
Okay. Here's what the tariffs were for. All right, here's what the tariffs did. Tariffs in Canada basically causes American goods to be banned in Canada. All right, that's the purpose. Okay, so when you sit up there and say we are tariffing, for example, we are going to put massive tariffs on American lumber. Okay, we have plenty of lumber in our area, right, in our country, and our workers can then be lumberjacks, but we don't have to compete with the American lumberjacks, all right, for within the timber industry. Okay? That's purpose number one. Okay? So Canada is saying our workers are more important than the actual free trade, therefore we're going to tariff US lumber out the wazoo. And we will use
Okay.
and we will use excuses like, well, we manage our forests so much better than the Americans do. This is some of the things that they've done. All right. The other thing is if you say a resource is critical to the nation, all right, for certain aspects. For example, iron. Iron is necessary to run a modern military. Okay? If you are reliant upon that import, okay, it becomes a security risk. All right? So how do you manage that? In World War II, the importation of oil was critical, all right, to the Axis. This is why America ends up in World War II, quite frankly, all right, as a direct competitor, due to the fact that we stripped Japan of the ability to utilize oil by banning oil sales, all right, which are us tariffing economically Japan when we banned oil sales to Japan. The Germans, okay, attempted to alleviate that shortage with two methods: to create their own internal oil industry with synthetic fuel, right, and then of course externally try to conquer areas that had massive oil reserves. This was one of the big reasons why they shifted focus from their initial operations in Operation Barbarossa, all right, to go to the southern route under which ends up with Stalingrad, all right, strictly so that they could try to get the Podesti and the other oil fields that were there in the south, all right, from Russia, to take away Russia's ability to have oil. So if you ban the sales of strategic items, all right, for a war industry, that's also part of the effectiveness. So there's two purposes for the tariffs. One is to protect your own workers, right? To say, okay, we want jobs in our country doing this, all right. We don't want those jobs to go overseas. And the other reason to tariff
Okay.
is if it's a strategic asset, all right. If you're trying to manage a strategic asset. So what do you have going on with the trade wars currently? Well, the first one is exactly what I tried to tell you about, like with the ones with Canada. Canada has been an unfair trading partner with the United States for decades. Okay, one of the things that they did, right, is a lot of the auto manufacturing went north and south, meaning up to Canada and down to Mexico, all right, for automobiles. Now, why did that happen? Because American workers, all right, had gotten so used to jacking up their prices because of the power of the auto unions that okay, and now this is kind of in depth with the politics of what went on here. All right, what you had were people that were CEOs of, like, for example, GM, and they would make deals with the trade unions that were, for all intents and purposes, the absolute golden parachute for the union workers. Okay, union workers.
Okay. I'm gonna mute myself real quick, but keep talking.
The union workers, for example, for the auto workers for GM, once they retired, their entire health care was being paid for by the union still. Okay, and they were retiring not at 65 or 63. They were actually engaging in retirement in the 50s because they had put in enough time for seniority. Now, this doesn't seem like a bad deal, except for as the life extended from the 50s, okay, you had more people, GM was paying more people not to work, meaning they'd already retired, than they were people working. and including the fact that now healthcare started to skyrocket and they were on the hook for this. Now, the initial CEOs that made those deals, you can say, well, that's the CEO's problem. He made that deal. That CEO was long gone. He made that deal because, well, they were on strike, and he could make that deal then, okay, because the problem would only occur in the future where he had already left GM as a CEO with a golden parachute. So he didn't care about making that. So the unions had basically jacked up the price of the auto industry to such a degree because of that, that they were looking to replace these. So you end up with NAFTA coming in, where the United States basically shipped auto manufacturing to Canada and to Mexico, because under NAFTA you could bring them back in free of charge. However, the tariffs on American products, okay, coming into Canada, were never removed. NAFTA did not prevent them from, for example, taking in American lumber. They still tariffed the shit out of American lumber. Okay? Mexico still tariffs the holy crap out of American products from going across. So you don't end up in a free trade alliance. NAFTA was supposed to be about free trade, but it wasn't free trade. Okay? So that's why Canada, and that's what you're also seeing in the European Union. How many Fords, how many Chryslers, how many Chevrolets do you see driving around in Europe? And I've been to Europe many times, all right, through the years. You don't see those manufacturers. Why?
Because they're considered luxury cars over there.
No.
Because they're foreign cars.
Well, because they tariff the shit out of them. Okay? They jack up the prices, all right, through several different means to prevent them from competing under free trade agreements. Okay? This is what they've done. And they've also done it with other things. For example, we're not going to allow American agricultural goods because, well, you guys are using Roundup to kill the weeds, for example. Now, you can say some of the things that they've done has kept their food better if you want, all right? And I'm not going to deny that, but some of the other things that they've done hasn't. They don't report things like the United States does. Right now, I can show you a story, for example, where there have been a total this season of 900 measles cases, right? 900. Now,
are you sure you're not talking about California with that?
Well, they're talking about California across the whole country. 900 measles cases across the entire United States. People are freaking out about it, right? Texas is actually a big area, all right, where basically it began, all right. But the thing is 900 cases of measles, when back in the 1960s, all right, measles were so ubiquitous, there were cases in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands. Okay, so what my point is there is a tendency by certain people and certain groups, all right, specifically governments, to claim, oh, this over here is so unsafe because of XYZ. Look at what this is. So we're going to ban that product, especially the Europeans are really good at this. Ban that product from coming in. Why is it that the number one beef manufacturer in the world can't sell beef in Europe? We are the largest manufacturer of beef. The United States is. And yet we can't sell in Europe. Why? Because they banned it. Their excuse? Because you allow, in these cases, some cases, they allow some of these things to increase production, such as steroids early on, all right, to increase production of the food or production of beef production, right, to make them more heavier in meat sooner, right, which takes place. But it's not in the beef that they can test, and because they can't test for it, they claim that it can be there anyway, so therefore they're going to ban it. So they've banned beef, American beef, throughout Europe. They would rather get it from Argentina, where it's being shipped far further, okay, than it is from the United States. This is what they've been doing. So I'm just using this as one example of how they've been doing these things with trades. So the tariffs that are being slapped on Europe and are being done to cut down the number of things that Europe has been doing to exclude us from the market. And this all goes back to the common market, where they were excluding American products, all right, extensively, all right, from the United States, while at the same time they were importing everything that they could into the United States without any real tariffs at all. And now people are saying, okay, well Trump is doing a reciprocal tariff there. Okay, well, we can't have that. Now you have the next two are Japan and China. All right, Japan, same thing applies. All right, as Europe in a lot of sense. Why aren't American cars sold in Japan? They're not sold in Japan because they're basically banned. They put such drastic tariffs on American products that you can't send them over there. All right, that's one of the main reasons. Now, I'm not saying that the U.S. car manufacturers are better than Japanese car manufacturers by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, because they're not.
Okay, just real quick, and I'm just going to put this out there because this is just something in my mind, and sorry for the noise in the background. I'm actually grocery shopping. But that sounds more like a way for them to protect their own economy.
It was.
Against foreign products.
It was.
But then again...
But once again, it comes down to, okay, if you're going to do it to us, all right, if you're going to why can't we do it to you? So Trump is trying to realign the massive imbalance of trade, all right? And that's what he said. The hands are off. You guys treat us like we have to be willing to take your goods, but you don't want to sit up there and reciprocate and be willing to take in American goods. Now, why did these deals get signed in the first place? A lot of these deals are the products of the late 40s and early 50s. And it was an attempt to rebuild these nations' industrial bases, all right, so that they didn't fall to the Soviet Union. That was the purpose behind this. Okay? So that was the main reason you saw us make these kind of unequal trade deals, because at the time, their production facilities weren't that large. Now their production facilities are large enough to compete successfully with the American manufacturers, but they don't want a realignment in those trades. Now we're dealing with China. China's the last one I want to talk about, because China is doing something that's even more insidious. China is doing two things, right? First of all, China is intellectually stealing everything that gets brought over to them. You send a car to China, China takes the car apart and says, okay, we can create the same kind of technology, all right, and build our own cars, all right, and then still basically put on these huge tariffs, all right, and steal all the technical expertise on how to do all this. That's the first thing that China's doing, all right, is they're basically engaged.
Then why can't America do the same thing?
Because we're part of the WTO. If you're going to actually trade within the WTO, right, the World Trade Organization, you promise not to do that. And if you get caught, you get penalized for it. But nobody's willing, our wonderful frickin' European allies are not willing to sit up there and join us to slap frickin' sanctions on frickin' China for that. Why? Because it basically harms America and not them. There's a lot of reasons to hate Europe, and this is just one of them. All right, they will sit up there and side with China against Americans as long as it's American products that are being ripped off. They have yet to ever try to hold China accountable for anything. That's in the WTO.
I mean, probably because they don't want to deal with the same crap that we are.
Well, because they're doing the same, in a certain sense, although it's not as bad, they're doing the same thing. We don't want American products in our countries either. Okay? So that's the first thing. The second thing that China's been doing is they've been going out and they've been taking a lot of our resources, okay, and then selling it back to us after it's gotten processed, like iron ore, copper ore, all these other things. All right? Well, these are strategic assets. Why are we shipping? Why is steel coming from China? Why is all this steel going to China, or iron going to China to make steel when it could be built back here in the United States? Well, once again, these trade deals were put in place, all right, along with the idea of American manufacturing being hammered by, once again, people going, oh, we're going to stop the building of X plant here because of XYZ. Why don't we produce shoes here in America? Why aren't Nike shoes built in America? Right? There's two reasons. One, cost of labor, but the main reason isn't the cost of labor. The main reason is all the other environmental and other nonsensical things that are put in place to prevent the building of these manufacturing plants. And steel is the absolute worst. We still have one of the world's largest deposits of iron ore still resides within this country, and yet we're not allowed to sit up there and manufacture steel anymore. Why? Well, because of this environmental regulation, and that environmental regulation, and this group shows up to sit up there and protest X, Y, Z. Okay, but steel is a strategic necessity in America. Pharmaceuticals are a strategic necessity in America. But you can't sit up there and put together a biopharmaceutical plant in the United States because of the cost of it, due to all sorts of stupid regulations trying to prevent it because of idiots, all right, who think that, okay, well, it's still cheaper to get these things from China. It's still cheaper to get these things from over there, without realizing if China ever cuts us off, and they have at times, okay, then all of a sudden we end up on the short end of that stick. So what you're trying to do now is sit up and say, okay, if you want a true trading relationship with China, China has to stop banning American imports. Once again, China is dead set against doing that. Now, China thought that they had a lot of leverage against America. Okay, specifically because in the process of buying, of being part of this trade relationship, they also took a lot of that money that they were getting and turned it back by purchasing U.S. currencies and U.S. treasuries. Okay, and the hope was, because they were containing most of America's debt, that because they own most of America's debt, they could then influence America by saying, okay, we'll sell your treasuries off and you guys will be destroyed, which, by the way, they attempted to do. The problem was that the rest of the world just snatched up the treasuries, that China got rid of. All right, and they're like, okay, well, we'll take them because we know that it's still a better asset than anything that China has. So China now, as a result, their industries are suffering. But that's what the job is to once again realign the trade deficits. If you want free trade, let's see free trade. It all comes back to free trade.
Well, okay, question. And this might sound kind of stupid coming from me, but then again, please understand, I understand almost nothing about economics, but I'm trying to. I'm making a damn effort to try and understand. I would just like to make sure that's perfectly clear. Okay?
Okay.
So what I'm kind of sort of understanding and or thinking here is that this would be sort of kind of the reason why Detroit went from being one of the most lucrative cities in the world, or at least in the United States, to being the slums that it is, to the point where bears are moving into abandoned houses.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just, like I said, my understanding of economics is very simplistic. I don't pretend to know about economics.
Well, when it comes
I leave that up to people like you and other things. Like, I have grown up middle class my whole life, so I don't have a frame of reference past that.
Okay.
I have either been middle class or dead broke.
One of the problems that's come into, because America has done certain things. Okay, one of the biggest things that people have forgotten about was the cost of food in America. All right, in comparison to the cost of food worldwide, was cratered in the 70s. The 70s and the 80s, food was so cheap in America. All right, that it in and of itself, okay, became a non-concern for most people. Were there always poor that were always struggling with food? Yes, but the vast majority of those people weren't struggling for food because the food was too expensive. It was because they were choosing to spend it on other things like drugs. Okay, you do not have starvation happening in America, all right, for the most part, all right, because of the cost of food. I'm not saying the kids that are being neglected by their parents and everything else. I'm just pointing this out of how cheap it was. And overall, housing in America had been extraordinarily cheap as well. But at some point in time, the redress begins to happen. All right. And the policies within America exacerbated that situation as well. Okay. But also the fact that the rest of the world no longer, okay, needed to strengthen itself vis-a-vis the rest of the countries around it, but they were still taking advantage of the United States largesse, all right, due to the fact that we had made these awful trade deals, all right, and they were awful trade deals. Do not get me wrong. Deciding not to sanction a lot of the stuff coming from Italy, a lot of the stuff coming from Spain, a lot of the stuff coming from France and Germany, right? Not putting tariffs on them, but allowing them to tariff the holy crap out of the United States. Okay, well, eventually, once again, the bills come due. And that's where we're at right now. Now, you add to that fact, all right, from a strategic point of view, the United States was the one fitting the bill for all of their defenses. We were the ones that were ensuring the protection of Germany. We were the ones that were ensuring the protection of Europe as a whole, that they never had to worry about their own defense. All right? Because after the 1980s, they basically said, well, the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. We're going to draw down our militaries massively. That's how you end up with Germany right now, having 300, only 300 main battle tanks.
That's it?
That's it. That's their entire inventory. 300 main battle tanks. 150 fighter planes. So do you start to see now where all this goes?
I'm not military, so I don't understand it, but I don't understand why countries would just cut down their military just because it's a time of peace. It's like, okay, well, look at the state of the world. Look at how they look back on history. Peace doesn't last very long.
The United States had been willing to foot the bill for so long that they got so used to it, and we didn't complain when after the wall fell, they started drawing down. We didn't complain to them and say, "Hey, you still part of this NATO thing. Hey, you still got to sit up and live up to your commitments." We didn't hold their feet to the fire. In fact, the only person who tried to hold their feet to the fire, and he caught hell for it, was Trump, which was during his first administration where he started pointing this stuff out. Up to that point, they had been doing it for decades. And the reason for it is they had perceived because because the Soviet Union had collapsed and they are now dealing with Russia, they also now had larger territorial buffer zones between them and their great big threat of Russia. All right, so that they were less concerned about it now. Right, so their point of view was, why should I spend all this money on defense? So what did they do? They poured all that money, all right, into we can grant all these social programs. Right? We can put all these social programs in there, and we can live high on the hog, but it's coming at the expense of the United States. So what are the Europeans doing now that we're saying, hey, we're going to stop funding this bullshit in frickin' Ukraine? Oh, the U.S. is not being an ally anymore. Oh, we're not going to be an ally. Hey, Canada, you're going to have to stop these trade deals. Oh, we were the greatest friend of the United States. How dare they do that to us? That's their comment. They don't even look at the fact that they're tariffing the shit out of us. All right, they just look at the thing. Well, that's accepted. That's the way it's always been. Because these people, literally, you've got generations have gone through, all right, this situation, all right? They've never lived in any other situation. Taking advantage of the United States to them is the norm.
Well, no, okay, I get that, and thank you for explaining to me the tariff thing, because I generally did not understand what it was. I'm like, okay, tariff, that's a kind of export tax or something. That was my
It's an
basic
import tax.
understanding of it. That's it.
It's an import tax.
But
It's basically saying if you send
an
send
import
us
tax.
this, we're going to tax it at another rate. In fact, early on, very very early on in the country.
Okay, explain it to me like I'm 5.
Okay, I am, and I will. Early on in the country, okay, the federal government's tax revenue, the revenue that came into the federal government, came from not taxing the individual citizen's income. It came from the money made off the tariffs for imports coming into the country.
Okay.
All right. And it was only some of the other taxes that started to become other issues. For example, you've heard about the whiskey rebellion.
Very vaguely. Very vaguely.
With the whiskey rebellion was basically a federal tax on the production and sale of whiskey.
Okay.
That's why they call it the whiskey rebellion. Well, people were like, wait a minute here.
Okay.
Why should I pay you money just because I want to sell whiskey here? Corn whiskey that I'm making. Screw you. Okay.
Well, was this around the time of Prohibition?
No, this was the late 1700s, early 1800s. Early on.
Okay, so I'm just curious because
President Washington
was born in the 90s, so
President George Washington.
I'm not exactly up to date on everything.
Okay, the first income tax was levied in America during the Civil War, and it was a temporary measure that actually stopped. The current income tax was reinstituted, all right, about in the early 1900s. All right, so that's where they started coming into the current income tax that you see today. That is the majority revenue, all right, for the federal government is from personal income tax now, and the progressive income tax that we run.
Okay, that makes kind of sense.
Okay.
But I feel like we're taking up a ton of time. Do you have any other stories, or are we just bullshitting at this point?
I have plenty of other stories to go into. But you were wondering what this is. But the rest of the world is in for a rude awakening. If you think that we're a laughing stock,
thank you for taking the time to explain that to me.
Yeah,
but I'm just muting because I'm out and doing errands.
Yeah, no problem. If you think that, and I'm talking to the world when I say you, if you think the rest of the world thinks that the United States is the laughing stock when it comes to this tariffs and that we're going to get laughed off the stage, good luck. Because the reality is that your economies, right, function from us. And if you think that we can't tariff you into oblivion,
we're the world police. It's either us or China.
Well, exactly. And China, and so what's basically happening here is they tried to sit up there. The Europeans were like, well, we can bounce our way into China's market and sell our goods to China. We don't need the United States. China being the second world economy, biggest economy for their people, we will sit up there and have China, all right, become our trading partner. But China's not going to be your trading partner. Okay? China's not going to change their tariff policies, all right, to accommodate Europe. Any more than Europe is going to accommodate China products coming into it. Okay? So the people who have all the leverage in this trade war that this guy says we're becoming a laughingstock for, but they're not laughing now. Why? Because there are trade deals in the works with some of these countries. Yes, these other countries are going to see a downturn as a result of this. There's no doubt about it. The rest of the world is going to have a welcome to real life situation, come to Jesus moment to realize, okay, you're competing with the United States and we're going to level the playing field because we can. You don't have any leverage against the United States. Okay? Unless you want to get into a physical war with the U.S. And the only one capable of actual military conflict with the U.S. in any meaningful way right now remains China. But China also knows what war with the United States would mean. And one of the big things is China would have to be able to defeat the United States in a war very rapidly, or they begin to starve. Because how are you going to import food? They do not have the ability, all right, to feed their own populations with the methodologies they currently employ in China. They could. They have the. If you used modern techniques in farming, you could actually raise enough food in China. China could become self-sufficient. But not if you're going to try and keep the Marxist philosophy alive. And so as long as you don't keep the Marxist...
I mean, that is one thing that you and I both very much agree on. We both hate communists.
All right, but the communist philosophy is
what's
causing...
they loathing passion.
Yeah. Meanwhile, what you see from the media is this kind of crap. First Canada...
Well, yeah.
First Canada, now Australia. Let me read this storyline. First Canada, now Australia. The Trump factor boosts another world leader in a close election. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, was returned to power in an election Saturday. The latest left-leaning leader to achieve a comeback victory as Trump roils global markets and upends international affairs. Albanese's Labour Party was projected to win the most seats in the nation's House of Representatives where the governments are formed, defeating the Conservative bloc that includes Liberal and National parties, according to the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Many races are still too close to call, and it was possible that the Albanese party would fall short of an outright majority in the 150-seat chamber, meaning that they'll work with smaller parties and independent lawmakers to govern. Okay, if these countries, that are electing these leftist politicians, are doing so just like Greece's did, which was we're going to continue to go and try to rob Peter to pay Paul. All right. The problem is that you want to complain about the United States and you're putting the U.S. as the big Billy bad guy. One of these things where you talk about you've got an external enemy, so you rally the troops behind the enemy. One of the things you were talking about earlier, Ms. Berger. Right?
Yeah, and versus them. That's exactly what I was referencing.
And it does work to a point. All right. The problem is you're cutting off their nose to spite their face. And you think that that's going to affect the United States? Go ahead, get tough with us. This is the thing that people don't realize. How can Canada get tough with the United States? What do we get from Canada for example, that we absolutely need that we don't produce in the United States? Nothing. Canada, on the other hand,
the only thing I can think of that the United States might get from Canada in certain areas is fucking maple syrup.
But we actually do have...
Which I will give them that. Because I've been to Canada and I've been to Vermont and the other United States that make syrup. I will say this. Canada does have the superior maple syrup. I'm sorry, but goddamn, their maple syrup is fucking amazing.
Okay.
Canada, if you get the chance, do try it.
What do we get from Canada?
Life-changing.
One of the things we get from Canada, obviously, is lumber, like I said. Another thing we get from Canada, is a lot of the, how do I say, I won't say rare earth metals, because it's not rare earth metals, but a lot of our metals, Canada still allows a lot of the production of metals, but they are things that we could mine for in the United States. For example, Canada is a platinum resource, but it's not like we don't have plenty of platinum we could mine in the United States. Oil, we get oil from Canada, right? Right now, basically they have train loads.
Don't we have a shit ton in Alaska?
Oh, we got oil all over the place. Okay, we got plenty of oil.
I know Texas and Alaska both have massive oil reserves.
We have massive oil reserves in lots of places in the United States. We're just not drilling for it. And the reason for it is because of stupid U.S. policies. No other reason. Because of U.S. stupid policy. Oh, this is off limits and that's off limits. We have so much oil off the coast of California, it's unbelievable. The oil shelf off California is massive,
Okay.
yet because of the policies that we've put in place, we're not sitting there drilling for it. But we could. There's nothing that we actually says that we can't do it, and that's what we need to do. What's worse is the what they wanted to do was use a pipeline from the Canadian oil to get the Canadian oil rather than doing it from trains. And of course, that all stopped because the environmental Nazis, all right, in a lot of freaking quote unquote Native American tribes, you can't put an oil pipeline across our land. We're going to protest it. What if there's a spill? Well, what if there's a spill from the trains? Because that happens all the time too. So their whole reasoning behind it is flawed, all right, and it jacks up the price because we're transporting oil via rail when we could just as easily transport it, okay, via pipeline. And who was the major billionaire that put a stop to that? The one everyone talks about being the great guy, all right, Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett owns most of
I don't
of
know
those
who that
trains.
is.
Warren
I have
Buffett.
no idea who that is.
Warren Buffett is a massive leftist billionaire. All right, they call him the Wizard of Omaha. Just so you know.
Billionaire plus leftist. That feels like that should be an oxymoron. But continue.
That most billionaires are leftists. Okay, you probably didn't know that either. Most billionaires are leftists. They're not conservatives. Okay, for a variety of reasons I'm not going to go into. But you've heard of Berkshire Hathaway?
No.
Okay, Berkshire Hathaway is the company that basically owned by Warren Buffett. He was the one who was complaining that his secretary pays more in taxes than he does.
Well, I mean,
okay,
that's just kind of fueling my point. For like, look, I don't like either side because there are certain issues that me personally I don't agree with on just a personal basis, which is kind of why I stay out of politics because I can't go to either side and be accepted. Because I'm like, okay, I like this policy on the right. I don't like that policy, but I like the policy that the left has on the other side.
Maybe because
great example.
Yeah, the leftist policy on the other side. There's only one leftist policy on the left that I can see that you would like on the left.
Well, yeah, but I'm just being in general. If I don't know too much about it, I'm not going to make a decision on it, just because you know how I am. I have to have all the information before I'll make an informed decision. That's just how I was brought up.
Well, change yourself in a more principled stance on life, and it becomes a lot easier.
Well, I'm going off of the fact of like, okay, these are the things that I'm concerned about. These are the things that, the government needs to just fuck off with.
Yeah, well, anyway. But anyway, what you have is...
At the same time that I like that one leftist policy, I also am very much against... It's like, listen, motherfucker, if I'm going to buy a gun, I'm going to buy a fucking gun.
Yeah. Well,
get your fucking nose out of my fucking business.
But TM is right about another thing, which is one of the biggest choke points that's causing the cost of energy to rise is the fact that we don't have refining. Now, why can't we refine more? Well, mainly because, quite frankly, we can't refine due to the fact that they refuse to allow a new refinery to be built because the environmentalists come out of the woodwork and it's all about the NIMBY. But on to the next thing.
Okay, I have a theory. Real quick. I just have a theory. What if, and I'm saying what if because I know fast food companies do this, so I'm going to assume that other companies do this. What if these things aren't actually they're happening, but they're not actually happening kind of thing? If they decide that they were going to do a thing, but then suddenly decide, I'm not going to do the thing, but there's this other place that's going to do something different, and I don't want them to do that just to kill the competition. What if they're just paying people to do stupid shit?
Oh, of course they're doing it. There's lots of organizations doing that. Anyway.
Because here's my theory, and this is on PETA specifically. I believe very, very firmly that PETA is actually not an organization that is made to, like help save animals, because we already have that. We have the ASPCA. They already do that. Why do we need PETA? Why? Because it props up the meat industry by them being annoying little shits.
No, their idea is leftism. Their main goal is they're what they call watermelons. Green on the outside, all right, red on the inside. It's all they've always been that way. On to the next story.
I know. Yeah.
Whoop. There we go. Ohio deputy struck and killed by father of teen fatally shot by an officer the day earlier. An Ohio sheriff's deputy.
I'm not surprised that this happened in Ohio.
An Ohio sheriff's deputy working on a traffic detail near the University of Cincinnati was struck and killed Friday by a vehicle driven by the father of a teenager who was shot and killed by authorities a day earlier, police said. The unidentified Hamilton County Sheriff's deputy was fatally struck around 1 p.m. near the university, which was hosting a graduation ceremony. The deputy was directing traffic at an intersection when he was hit. Cincinnati Police Chief Teresa Settig, I'm trying to butcher your name, I don't know how to pronounce it, I told reporters at the news conference. The deputy was taken to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center where he died. He was not identified Friday. Hamilton County's Sheriff Carmine McGuffey, described him as wonderful and dedicated. I knew the man. I knew what a tremendous, tremendous person he is and what a tremendous loss we have all suffered. The deputy retired a few months ago, but continued to work as a special deputy, the sheriff said. The father of an 18-year-old who was shot and killed by Cincinnati police Thursday was driving the car that hit the deputy, authorities said. He was also taken to a hospital. During an afternoon commencement ceremony, the University of Cincinnati President Neville Pinto, called for a moment of silence in his opening remarks. Before we get started, sadly, I have to report an incident that occurred today with the Hamilton County's deputy sheriff on Martin Luther King Drive, Pinto said. It was a very serious incident.
Why is it that it's always the name of the street where all the crazy shit happens?
It was
Has anyone else noticed that it's always that? It's always Martin Luther King Drive or Martin Luther King Road or some variation of that. That is always where the most people die. It's like becoming like the Bermuda Triangle of murder. and I'm half tempted to restart my YouTube channel just for that, just to see.
It was a serious incident. I would like to ask for a moment of silence for respect for this officer. The Cincinnati Police Department is leading the investigation into the deputy's killing. The son of the suspect was shot and killed Thursday as Cincinnati police officers chased 4 suspected car thieves in an encounter that lasted just 6 seconds. Officers responded to a call around 9:30 a.m. about a Kia SUV stolen from Edgewood, Kentucky, when 4 suspects inside the car took off running. One officer ran after one suspect while another officer pursued another. One of the suspects had a handgun, Thedage said. The suspect allegedly pointed the gun, which had an extended magazine, at the officer, who opened fire, fatally striking the teen. 2 other suspects were caught and arrested, and one of them remains on the run. So basically, this father, whose son was killed by a police officer, probably, probably just overwhelmed with grief, saw an officer and decided to kill him. It doesn't sound like this officer was actually involved in the arrest and killing of his son.
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't.
It sounds like this guy was...
Wait a minute. Wait. If I could be wrong, but after those kind of incidences where an officer shoots and fatally kills someone that isn't the person they were trying to arrest or wasn't like actively firing at them, don't they have to go on like a paid suspension where they have to turn in their badge and their gun for a certain amount of time?
Okay,
Or
normally in normal metro areas, okay, it is the policy that
because Cincinnati is one of those. I lived in Ohio. I know about Cincinnati.
right, but metro areas, all right, normally have a policy that if an officer is involved in a shooting, all right, they don't turn in their badge, but they are placed on administrative duties. All right, they're taking off.
So they don't go out onto the streets
Correct.
for any reason.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I thought.
But
'Cause
that's
I'm like,
not. But that's.
hang on.
I want to point out that that's a general policy for police. It's not a required policy. Okay.
Oh no, I understand that. I was just making sure. I was wondering if that was a factor in this case.
I suspect in this case,
but
it could just be a.
It probably doesn't say.
Yeah, it doesn't say, and obviously an investigation is going to have to determine whether or not the incident
I'm just
where
curious,
the guy was.
How fast was this motherfucker going to hit and fatally kill an officer who was directing traffic?
You can kill
in those situations. You're stopped, so you're going to have to go from 0 to well over 30.
If you hit somebody at 20 miles an hour who wasn't expecting it, you can kill them fairly easily. It just depends on. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into this, and
there's a lot of factors in it. But I do know that if you're going under 30 miles an hour, you have a way better chance of surviving than you would if they are going above 30 miles an hour.
Well, there's a lot of things come into play. In this case, the officer who was struck was obviously old. Okay.
Yeah.
Which is another aspect, and I say that because he had already retired. Okay, so most likely he was in his late 50s. All right, so he's an elderly gentleman.
At minimum. Minimum.
Right. So he was an elderly gentleman.
Well, I wouldn't really say 50s is elderly, but he could have some underlying health issues. We don't know.
Right. Well, either way, he had retired. Right. So, like I said, he was still even at 50. You don't bounce back as well at 50 as you do at 40.
Or even 30. Shit! I don't bounce back from shit at 30.
so
well as I did. So.
And we also don't know whether or not this is intentional or not. Okay. Because it could be.
It could have just been someone who had too many sips of fucking out of their flask and just fucking floored it.
It could. Well, I wouldn't say that necessarily floored it, because it could be just he was driving along where this guy was standing was on the edge somewhere, right? And he was driving along, wasn't paying attention, all right, and didn't realize that his car had drifted into that area, right? I'm not saying that is what happened. Fair. We don't know. We don't. I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen in this case that can cause it. You don't have to be doing.
Oh no, I agree. I agree. I fully agree.
So
I was just curious.
I'm feeling old at 55. Not yet ancient, but I'm getting there. Okay. Let's get out of it.
If you're 55, you're an old fucker. You're old enough to be my father.
From the smoking gun. Drunk, pantless man told police his name was Charles Dickens.
Okay, I'm going to guess. Take a wild guess. Florida.
It's a tale of two identities. Vincent Conroy, 56, was allegedly drunk and walking around a Florida parking lot, all right, wearing only a T-shirt and no pants.
I fucking called it. Pick up the phone, Nomad. I fucking called it.
Early Wednesday morning, with his private parts on public display, Conroy was spotted with 2 wine bottles and a can of beer. This guy was.
That guy knows how to party. That guy knows how to fucking party. Let my boy go. Let my man party. Let him live his life.
When confronted by police,
man was pantsless, drunk, and having himself a good day. Why you being a hater? Stop hating.
When confronted by police and asked to identify himself, the suspect provided the name Charles Dickens, according to the arrest report. It was later discovered that his name was Vincent Conroy. In addition to open container and exposure of sexual organs accounts, he was also charged with providing a false name to law enforcement, which apparently is also a crime.
If you're walking around without pants on, and you don't make some kind of a dick joke, that's just a lost opportunity.
A day after being locked up in the local bleak house, all right, Conroy was freed Thursday on his own recognizance by the county judge. Conroy and Dickens's pictures are posted there. This guy was obviously, like you said, he was obviously drunk and decided to make a dick joke. Gotta give him credit for that part, but getting charged with making a false statement to the police is never a good thing either, though.
I know, but you gotta admit, that man knows how to fucking party.
I'd still like to know how he had a can of beer and 2 bottles of wine. I mean, he's carrying quite a load on him without any pants.
That he had his dexterity skill is maxed the fuck out, okay? That motherfucker had that shit on lock. I bet you he could use chopsticks the first time.
In a story that you probably agree with, which I think you're completely loony about, Luigi the Musical, about the accused United Healthcare CEO to debut in San Francisco.
When's it coming to Chicago?
from the killer barber
I need to see it.
Of Sweeney Todd to Stephanie Sondheim's Assassins.
Oh, fuck yes!
Musicals have long dealt with morbid subject matter. Now a musical comedy based on Luigi Mangione, the 26-year-old man accused of gunning down the CEO of a healthcare company, is on its way to San Francisco. Luigi the Musical is billed as a story of love, murder, and hash browns. And it is it's due to open in June.
Send me the link. Send me the link.
I will send you the link.
I need to see this. Send me the fucking link. Take my fucking money.
What the hell is wrong with you? The guy is a murdering thug.
Yes. I don't care. Look at.
I don't care.
Nomad. Nomad. You have known me for how many years?
He's a murdering thug.
I used to run a YouTube channel that talked about serial killers and all kinds of fucked up shit. I once did a 20-minute video all on the shit I knew about cannibalism off the top of my head, and I started making cannibal puns.
There you go. Now you can be in a musical.
Okay.
I don't know what your role is going to be. Maybe they'll hire you as the McDonald's worker that turned him in.
No. I don't want to be a part of it. I just want to see it. And by the way, I do actually really enjoy musicals. For my Sweet 16th, I actually got to see Phantom of the Opera on Broadway at the Majestic Theater in New York.
That's cool.
Which is actually really cool. Nomad, if you ever do get the opportunity to go to New York and see a play there on Broadway, absolutely. No, I'm actually being very serious. Absolutely do it.
Don't go to pieces about cannibalism.
Absolutely do it.
Does it star Mario and Peach?
You know what? I'd watch it. I'd watch that too.
Oh my god. Okay.
That would make it that much better. I get nostalgia and my murder fix at the same time. What up?
Two stories left. Watch rare.
I'm still going around.
Watch rare vid of a glowing albino killer whale as elusive as real life Moby Dick breaches waves, leaving orca fans shaking. Scientists say.
I'm sorry. The fuck did you just say?
Scientists.
Did you just say a glow in the dark orca?
A glowing albino killer whale. I just read the headlines.
So it's an albino killer whale that is so goddamn white that it has an afterglow effect. Is that what
it's an albino whale. If you take a look at the pictures, you can tell it's a killer whale still, because it's still got the characteristic markings of it, but it is white. Scientists say that the animal has a glowing mutation which creates the striking white appearance and is one of just a handful worldwide. The majestic creature can be seen swimming in a pod of at least 5 ordinary orcas. It repeatedly swoops up out of the water before crashing back into the ocean. The ghostly appearance means it really stands out amongst the pile.
That's kind of cool.
It is a in the pictures that they're showing, okay, the the uh, the one that they're showing in the first picture versus the one that they're showing in the bottom picture are two different ones. All right, it's kind of interesting. They're two different albino killer whales, and I know that because if you take a look at the dorsal fin, the one in the back, all right, one's for a female, one's for a male. Right, so they're two different animals. It must be multiple killer whales, white killer whales that are running with this. Right,
Well,
and this
that's actually really interesting because albino animals in any aspect, for
Well-
them to actually reach adulthood is incredibly rare.
yeah, TC glowing, was it radioactive? And then Matt Barkley says like Godzilla. Well, it wasn't Japanese. It was a Japanese cameraman. It was filmed near Japan. just pointing this out.
I mean, let's not rule it out. Let's just not rule it out, okay? Is it radioactive? We don't know. But considering everything, yeah, we're not ruling it out.
The guy that took the pictures was a freelance photographer Hayakawa, who is 64, based out of Sapporo, Japan. So, just good call there. Okay, final story. Final story of the day. Coyote drinks from a St. Angeles salon's skylight. This is a Los Angeles hairdresser captured a video of a coyote that climbed onto the roof of his salon to drink the water collected in the skylight. Travis Ogletree posted a video to TikTok which shows the scene he was confronted with when he looked up at a skylight in his treehouse salon in Los Angeles. The video shows a coyote standing on the roof drinking water that had collected there, all right, on the glass skylight. Just another day at Treehouse.
I mean, kudos to the coyote, I guess. That's pretty impressive.
I'd be a little bit afraid that the coyote would like come through the glass and pay you a visit. To be honest.
No, actually, coyotes don't weigh that much, and the skylight glass is similar to like your windshield in a car.
It's Los Angeles.
So
Who knows?
It's fairly solid. Yeah, but that stuff is still pretty solid. It would be pretty difficult to break it without like significant impact.
I don't disagree. But that was the last story of the day. That was my final story. So I think I'm finished with everything. So I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. Do you have any last words, Ms. Murder? Thank you for coming out again, by the way.
No, I'm kind of in a grocery store, so I'm going to head out.
All right. I'll thank you. Thanks for coming. Well, good luck, everybody. Yeah. Have a good day. Bye-bye.